Hey there, I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to take you through how I make my labels using Canva. So I use many different softwares to actually make my labels, but today I'm going to use Canva. So I actually already made the labels technically. I use a couple different softwares to make my labels, one of them being Canva, another being Illustrator, and then Photoshop. It just kind of depends on the day and how I'm feeling in terms of like what I want to use to make my labels. For Illustrator and Photoshop, I'm not a designer by trade. I kind of have taught myself how to use those softwares, and with Illustrator I'm not good at it at all. It's definitely something that I just started using, and my boyfriend is a designer, so whenever I need help I usually ask him for like tips and tricks on how to do things. And honestly, after I'm done making any kind of design, I usually pass it to him to review and give me feedback, which is really helpful for me, because then I kind of take that feedback and I learn from it, and it's helped me have a better idea of what looks good, what doesn't look good. Because, you know, honestly, I could look at something and say like, oh, that looks great, and then he'll look at it and be like, oh, that word is a little bit too left aligned, or, you know, it's not centered the way it should be. But for him, because he's a designer, he can see those little things that need to be tweaked and changed and things like that. So anyways, I've learned a lot from him, but that doesn't mean I'm an expert in anything, including Canva, honestly. So yeah, I've made for my room sprays these labels, which they don't exactly look like this. I made this in Illustrator, actually. So it came out really good. But for other labels, I've used Canva and Photoshop, mostly Canva, and the reason is because they have a lot of the shapes there. They make a lot of the effects that you can do to the fonts and the words and things like that much easier. It's like a click of a button versus, you know, like Photoshop or Illustrator. It's much more manual to get the same result. Granted, if that's what you do, that's what you do. You like doing that, it's totally fine. I still want to learn how to do those things. So like making different shapes and, you know, just different things. Like I definitely do want to learn Illustrator and Photoshop a lot more. I also use Lightroom to edit my photos, which I've watched a couple of YouTube tutorials on how to edit my photos properly and how to use some of the tools on there. So I've become sort of proficient in using that. So if you want to see me edit some of my product shots or just like photos in general. So in this video, I'm going to take you through how I make my labels for my spa collection that I'm relaunching. So I used to have a couple of scents that were in this spa collection. I didn't want to call it aromatherapy just because they didn't have essential oils. Therefore, they didn't actually have the effect that an essential oil says it should have, if that makes sense. So I have a peppermint eucalyptus scent. This is also what the label looks like. I'm gonna take you through how I made this. So I'm gonna like go backwards and show you how I did all these things. But yeah, so that's a long little like intro into all that stuff, but I'll show you everything that I'm doing in Canva and kind of backtrack and from scratch show you how I did all this stuff. Okay, so this is the third time I'm attempting this, and that's all because of the screen recorder that I have attached to my window. I recorded this multiple times and it just froze and lost all of the content. So let's try this again. All right, so I'm going to take you through how to make this label in Canva. So this will be the label that I use for my spa collection. To recap, I wanted to redo my spa collection, the look and feel, because I felt like it didn't align with my current brand guidelines. And so I have a very like retro vibe. It's a little bit more simplistic than what you would usually imagine retro to look like, but this is the vibe I'm going for. So I wanted to change the fonts that I'm using. I also wanted to limit the amount of fonts that I use to 2. And then also be mindful of the font sizes and the layout and all that stuff. I also just wanted to make it look different than what I usually see out there. I use Pinterest a lot for brainstorming what I want my labels to look like, but ultimately I try and just make something my own. That way my labels stand out amongst other people. So I'll take you through how I make this, and hopefully this video records perfectly and I can get this YouTube video up and it'll all be good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I'm just going to duplicate this page and then I'm going to delete everything on here. And the reason why I want to keep everything on this page is just so we can reference everything up here and we could just make sure it all looks the same. But all right, so what we'll do is we'll go over to text and we'll just add a text box. So first thing we're going to do is add peppermint into one text box, and then we're going to copy and paste. So if you have a Mac, that is Command C and then for copy, and then Command V for paste. Then we're going to change this to eucalyptus. And the reason why we wouldn't put both of these in the same text box is because we're going to add a curve to our text. And if you put them both in the same text box, it won't look like this. So we want them to both have the same exact curve and lay one on top of another. And if we were to keep it in the same, it'll look like this, which isn't the vibe we're going for the fragrance name. So now what we'll do, we'll just center it a little bit. We won't have to really worry about this just yet. So we'll just hold Shift, select. That way you can group these together, not permanently, but you can group them so that way you can change like the font size, the font style, all those things pretty easily and at the same time. So we're gonna change our font to Shorthand. That is the font style that I'm going to use for the fragrance oil name. And that's what it looks like. So we're just gonna zoom out just a little bit. And I do that by pinching inwards. I'm using like the Mac mouse, the magic mouse. So if you pinch this way in, it'll zoom out, and if you pinch outwards, it'll zoom in. That feels weird, but that's the best way I can explain it. So we're gonna center us again, and then do this, and we're just gonna make this a little bit smaller, and then center that again. So next, what we're going to do is go to Effects, which is right here. And then we're going to go to Curve. And it automatically does this weird thing with the text, so we don't want that. We want it to have a slight curve. So kind of like that. So at 31, that kind of gives us the vibe we're going for. And then you can see how far you want eucalyptus to be from peppermint. Kind of like it to be a little bit close. So I think that's fine. And then we just want to select these again and recenter it just to make sure we're all aligned. So we have our fragrance oil name centered. It's perfect. That's the way I want it to look. So next what we'll do is we'll just add another text box. I'll just move this up so you can see what I'm doing. Then we're going to add the name, which is Quien Soy Shoppe. That's the name of my business. And then we're going to change it to Quicksand. So I like Quicksand. I think it's nice. It's simplistic. It's a little bit rounded, similar to the Shorthand font. It's not too different. And then what we'll do is we'll bold it just so it's easier to see. And then we're going to uppercase it. And then we're going to shrink it. So we're going to drop it down to 9. And then what we'll do is we'll go to spacing and we'll increase the spacing. So letter spacing and line spacing are a bit different. Line spacing is if we were to have, say, peppermint eucalyptus in the same text box, that line spacing controls the amount of space in between peppermint and eucalyptus if they're stacked. So it'll reduce the space or increase the space if that's what you want. And then letter spacing increases or decreases the space between the letters. So we're going to increase the space between the letters. And I already know what I want it to be. It's 286. So that'll make it look like that. And you can change up the space that you want. You can kind of, shrink it, increase it, do whatever you want, see what you like best. But I already know that 286 is where I want to be. So that's where we're at. And then we'll select it and we want to create a curve. So I want my logo to look like a sun rising from the peppermint. And so we're gonna add that curve, and it kind of made it perfect. Probably because I remembered all the times I've attempted to make this label tutorial. So anyways, what I'll do is I'll just show you. So if you move this around, if you go to the negatives, it brings the curve up. And if you go to the positives, it brings it down. So we're gonna go back to that 56 because that's where I want to be. And it's actually spaced pretty well, but you can add more breathing room between the text if you want. So that's that part of it. I think that looks pretty good, so we'll move on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the fragrance notes, and those fragrance notes are going to have the same font style as the Quien Soy Shoppe. So the font size, possibly, as well as the font type. So we'll just copy and paste this to make our lives easier. And then remove the curve because we don't want that. And then what I'll do, I'm just going to copy and paste what I have, which is here. And as you can see, the font size is way too big, and it's the same font size as Quien Soy Shoppe. So we're going to reduce this down and see what we like. So I reduced it down to 7, and now we're going to crunch this in. That way it brings it to 2 lines, and then we're going to center. And I like the way it looks. I think this, when it prints, it'll be legible. You don't want to make it too small. And then the next thing we'll do is copy and paste eucalyptus, because we're going to add a little bit more detail to our label. So we're going to say made in New York. We're going to say this is an 8-ounce soy candle. We're going to say hand poured in small batches. And that's all going to go on the outside of all the details we just added. So I copy and pasted eucalyptus because that will be the font type that we're going to use. So what we'll do is we'll go here and we'll take out the curve. And then what we'll do also, I'll just type it in. We'll go to 8-ounce soy candle, and then reduce it down to the same size as our fragrance notes, which was 7. And then we also need to uppercase this. And as you can see, there's this pink box that is around our main text. And this is basically saying that that text is centered in this shape that we have. So what I want to do is I want to add all the extra details on the outside of this box. And the reason is because I don't want there to be too much dead space on the outside. Because when I upload this design into Cricut, I'm going to add extra space to allow for me to curve the corners. I just think that looks better for this particular design that I'm doing. And so when you add that curve in Cricut, it adds extra space on the outside. And that means that there's going to be even more dead space. So to reduce that, I'm just going to add this text to the outer box instead. So we're just going to center that. Then we're going to copy and paste this because we're going to say made in New York. And I want this to read sideways. So I'm going to use this feature here. So you have 2 buttons. This one is to move your text around. You could just grab it from here, but sometimes like if the cursor is there, or if the, I don't even know what you call that. Whatever you call that, it means that you can make edits to the text. Sometimes if that's already like clicked in, you can't move the text box. So then you can just use this to move it. But most of the time I click out and I'm able to do it that way. But up to you. And then this right here will help you rotate. So I'm just going to rotate this to 90 degrees. And this is just to make sure that it's even. And then we're going to move it to the outer box and then make sure this is centered. So perfect. Then we're going to add the text to the other side, which will be hand poured in small batches. And then we'll just extend this, that way it's one line. Move it over here, and then now we want to rotate it to negative 90 degrees. Like so. I can get it. There you go. All right, so now we want to put down the outer box and center it. So now we have our label. So let's just zoom out a little bit and see if we like it. As you can see, I made these a little bit bigger in this one. So they're 7.4. So what we can do, we can just update that. And I think I did that because I wanted it to be more legible. So we'll just increase it a bit. And that's the good thing about Canva. I mean, you can use this, you can do this in any software, but you want to just make sure that you're test printing your labels just to make sure that everything is legible. And also just so you can see if there's any edits you want to make. So I want to make peppermint eucalyptus a little bit bigger. So I'm going to do that. Cool. And then I also want to make sure that this is as centered as possible. So I like the way this looks. The next thing is there's space here and space here that's uneven and it's bothering me. So we're going to highlight everything. And then we're going to center like so. Which means that now these two are not centered. So let's recenter these like so. And now we have our label. You can zoom in a bit, take a look at everything. But yeah, now this is the opportunity to download, upload to whatever software that you use to print and make your labels, and to see if the sizes, the font, all that stuff is legible. One thing I would just make sure with fonts like this that are very thin is that sometimes when you print on certain papers, it might not show up, might not be legible. So always test print to make sure that you can read it. And then you can either bold it if the font allows it, or increase the size of the font, or ultimately if you can't, if none of that works, then you'll just have to change the font type. But so once you're done with that, I'll just show you how you would download. So you would go up here, you would go up here to share, you would go to download, and then here is your download screen. And these are all the details that you want to pay attention to when it comes to your labels. So there's PNG, there's JPEG, PDF, GIF, video, all that stuff. I like to use PNG. It's a bigger file, so sometimes you might have some issues with Cricut uploading that file. I just like PNGs. I'm just going to stick beside it. So I'm just going to increase this to 2 because I want it to be as big as Cricut will allow me to upload, just so the quality stays there. And then here, this is very important. You want to make sure that you are highlighting the file or the design that you want. And by design, I mean page. So you need to pay attention to what page number your design is on. You could keep them all selected and download it, but then that creates a zip folder, and then you'll have to open that zip folder, then upload from there. But if you don't want to do all that, you can just unselect this. And I know that this is page 2. So I'm just going to highlight page 2, hit done, and then go to download. And then my file is downloading and I have access to it. Then I can go ahead and put it in Cricut and start putting the final touches on my candle. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions regarding any of this, but it's pretty simple. Canva is pretty great in terms of making it very simple for you to make the designs that you want to make. Also from scratch, like I know there's a lot of talk about Canva being like a cheat way for people to call themselves designers and that you're not a real designer if you use Canva. But I do think that there's a lot that you can do in Canva, and I made this all myself. I didn't use any templates in Canva. It just, for me, it makes it easier in terms of the different tools that they have. Like creating a curve was very simple. It's just very user intuitive. And I think that's what makes it a great tool, especially for a small business owner. You don't have to use Illustrator. You don't have to use Photoshop. You can just use this, and it kind of encompasses all those things all in one and just simplifies it. So I highly recommend it, but I hope this was helpful for anybody who has a small business, or just anyone who's looking to just create things for fun, for social media, whatever it is.